and I personally love a mint tea. I have a cup of mint tea almost every night. It's just super soothing and very comforting. It's sort of like that habitual thing for me. So I decided I am going to make a ginger mint and a little bit of lemon, and it is really easy, and I'll take you through that. So what I will be using, and this makes quite a bit. So this is also something that you can make and enjoy hot this evening, and then maybe you want to throw it over ice tomorrow and have as a cool beverage. Will tomorrow night's Bone Health Speaker Series be recorded? Absolutely. Sandy, our speaker series are always recorded. So all of our sessions that we have done over the last several months are all in our library. So yes, absolutely. Great question. So, and just a reminder to mute yourself, please. I'm hearing some background noise just so that we're not a distraction. I hear a little bit. Okay. Oh, bless you. Okay, let's get started. So I have a medium-sized saucepan here. I've got 4 cups of water in it, and I'm adding another 4. So like I said, this makes quite a bit, which I like, whether you want to sip on tea yourself or have it as a cold beverage tomorrow. I will be coming back to my Pyrex dish here because I'll be straining it at the end. So you might want to just keep that handy. The first thing we need for our ginger mint tea is obviously ginger root. So if you've never seen ginger root, whoops, this is what it looks like, right? Sometimes we see sunchokes and it looks like ginger root, but I am using fresh ginger root. We want a pretty good size piece for this because we want to sort of get all of that beautiful ginger flavor. So I have this little piece that I peeled, and I have this little guy here that I will peel. Peeling ginger root is so easy. All you need is a spoon. So all you just take your spoon and it just pulls right off. It's super, it takes minimal effort. You don't need a lot of strength to do this. Of course, you could use a vegetable peeler if you like, but I'll be using that for my lemon peel. And I'm taking off like most of the skin of the ginger root. If a little bit hangs on there, there are worse things in life. That's okay. But I'm removing the skin, so I'll get this cleaned off. And this just helps to expose more of that beautiful ginger flavor. So I've got these 2 pieces of ginger here, and I'm just going to cut them into rounds. So not super large, kind of that, I don't know, 1/2 inch maybe. Just kind of cut them into rounds like that so that we really do expose as much of the actual root as we can. Some recipes have you just cut little slits or half this even, not all the way through, but maybe 3/4 of the way through. So it just opens a little bit, but stays intact just to sort of expose. So you could do that as well. I'll just continue to cut this through. Perfect. And if you like a stronger ginger flavor, if that's your jam, then by all means, go for it. Of course, you can add some more to it. If you want to be a little bit more conservative, that's okay as well. But once you prep all of your ginger, all of this will go in to our saucepan also. So that goes in first. And then we're using some real lemon. So for this, I love this because we're using the peel and we're actually using the juice. So with that vegetable peeler, we're just going to peel 2 or 3 good sized pieces of the rind. And this is what we're going to boil first. And again, like anytime we have these essential oils, it really imparts some beautiful lemon flavor. So this is our first step. So I've got 3 pieces here. We're going to start by boiling these. Sometimes I like to just give them a little twist just to kind of break open those essential oils. Oops, all 3 of these go in. That's the 5-second rule. And then and then we're going to juice our lemon. And this is something that we will add at the end. Okay, so you could either juice it now or you could juice it later, but we'll do it now. And I'll take you through what those steps will look like. But we're going to juice the whole lemon, which I love. You want to get as much juice out. Okay. And for those that have hopped on as we started, first, welcome to our virtual hangout. We are focusing on tapping. And if you're like, that doesn't look like tapping, I'm not sure this is what I signed up for. Don't worry, we're getting to Sarah. I'm just starting off by making a little bit of tea to kind of get us in the comfy mode. I'm making a ginger mint lemon tea, okay? So I'm setting my lemon juice aside. We'll come back to that. And then finally, what we need is some fresh mint. Now, the beauty of this is you can use spearmint. You can use, if you're growing different variations of mint, that can be super fun. So really use whatever you have. There's one summer I even grew chocolate mint, which was really fun. And it smelled like mint chocolate chip. It was really crazy. So what we're doing with this is I'm just separating the leaves from the stems. We're going to start by boiling the stems first. And then again, just similar to when we're adding our lemon juice, we'll add in our mint leaves. So what you want to do is just separate the two of those. And also similar to our lemon peel, when we add in our mint leaves, sometimes if you've ever seen like a bartender, they'll sort of like slap the lemon a little bit or just sort of press it because it opens up the oils and it really starts to bring out that minty flavor. So we want to impart, oops, wrong one. So we're just adding the stems right now. And then from here, we'll bring our tea up to a boil, saving our leaves for later. So what I'll do is I'm going to bring this up to a boil. Once it's boiling, I will turn it down. I'll partially cover it with my lid and I'll let that simmer for about 20 minutes. So I'll do this as we move through class. At that 20-minute mark, just so you know, what you'll see me do is remove this from heat. I'll turn it off heat and I'll remove it. And then we're going to steep and finish the flavors of our tea. That's where our fresh mint leaves will go in. We'll add our lemon juice and we will add a little bit of honey. If you want to add it during it, that's fine. If you want to wait, if you want to leave it out altogether, but I'll be adding a little bit of honey as everything steeps. And then at the end of our session tonight, I'll strain it and pour it, and then you'll be relaxed. You're ready to maybe cozy in for the night and you'll enjoy some tea. So that'll be my first steps. So for right now, I'm in a holding pattern. I will bring Sarah back on so she can take us through tapping and talk a little bit about those techniques and impart all of your knowledge and help to all of us, because I'm sure we can all use it. So thank you, Sarah.
And we're definitely in the cozy and feeling good self-care kind of vibe here. So that looks so good, Erin. I love your fresh mint, and I'm so jealous about your chocolate mint plant.
It was a great little find. Yeah.
That's like a great idea. I had to try that. So I'm curious to know what all y'all's experience with tapping is, but it's hard for me to ask because I can't even see everybody. So if you're comfortable chatting in and letting me know, I either have done tapping and curious about it, know anything about it, just a little bit about your background. And while you're answering that question for me, I want to share a screen with you that's just to quickly show you how the protocol works, and then we will definitely be doing it together. So to do tapping, then I'll tell you the why, but we'll start with the how. We begin by tapping the sides of your hands together, or you tap the side of your hand with your fingertips. It doesn't matter which side you use, whether you do both together or use fingertips. And while we're tapping on the side of the hand, this is how we set the whole thing up. We're gonna have a statement of the problem and an affirmation. So it's kind of like, even though I'm really upset right now, and the affirmation is, I completely accept myself. So we do that just twice. The rest of the time when we're tapping, we don't have to accept ourselves anymore. We just focus on the problem. And the rest of the tapping spots are the top of your head, the inside corner of your eyebrow, right by the bridge of your nose, right outside of your eye, right on that bone. So it almost makes your eyeball wiggle a little bit, right under your eye, right under your nose, right under your mouth, and that little horizontal line before your chin, right below your collarbones. And usually I'll use both hands at the collarbone or use one hand with my finger and thumb to just get both sides. This is a tricky one. A lot of people end up accidentally tapping way out here. So I want to focus on getting more to the midline. Yeah. And the last place is under your arm at the bra strap area. So you can do one hand or both. You can either go like chicken wings or like a bear hug or just one side. Doesn't matter which side or whether you use one hand or both. And then the third point on my how to tap screen here is the bonus extra. It's not always included, but if you're really upset or really stuck, it's so helpful. And they are to add the finger points and then do this thing called the 9 gamut. So the finger points are on the bottom of your nail bed. And if you're holding your hand out with the thumb on top at the ceiling side of your fingernail bed. So thumbnail bed, and then index finger. So see them like right there, like middle finger.
Sarah?
Yeah.
We can't see you. At least I can't.
Oh, because I yeah.
Yeah,
So
we can't
there's
see
the fingernail,
there you go.
the middle finger, and the baby finger. So thumbnail, index, middle, and baby finger. So those are the finger points that's not always included in EFT tapping, but it's definitely a part of the protocol. And then, thank you for reminding me. I was being so careful to show you, but I had my screen share going. And then the last thing is called the 9 gamut. And to do the thumbnail point is, if you're holding your hand up like you're karate chopping, it's the outside bottom of the thumbnail, top of the bottom. The 9 gamut point is you tap on the back of your hand, and this is the thyroid triple warmer meridian treatment point. And while you continue tapping there, you do 9 things. So play along, and you'll close your eyes and then open them. Look down to one side and back up. Look down to the other side and back up. And this is the tricky one. You look straight up and draw a big circle with your eyeballs. And then you go the other way. Then you're done with your eyes and you hum a little tune. Count to 5 quickly, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and hum a little tune. That's the whole EFT. And we'll have the chance to really feel what it feels like, but I just wanted to kind of go through the why and wherefore so you could really see what all the points are. So I think I got the answer to the thumb question. Yeah. So are you all clear on the place on the thumb? You don't need to do both sides. So that's a good question. And you don't have to do both sides. And when you look at different practitioners or videos that are out there, sometimes people are tapping on both sides of their face. And sometimes people just do one side. It doesn't matter. It all works. So I'm going to look through your comments and see. So we've got a beginner. Some beginners who have never heard of it. Some people who have seen a little bit on YouTube. Somebody who's been tapping with me in our support group or a tapping group and thought it was really helpful. Some people who have a little bit of experience and a lot of curiosity, brand new, just heard of it for the first time. Very good mix. Practice before and love it and need to do it more often. Okay, let's do a little experiment if you'll be willing and have an opportunity to see how it really can change the way that you're feeling. So what we're going to do is take a breath and rate that breath satisfaction on a 10 scale. So 10 is a fully relaxed breath. and 0 is, you know, suffocating. And just rate your breath on a 10 scale. So let's do that together now. So take a breath. And rate the satisfaction of that breath on a 0 to 10 scale. Now, we're going to do tapping on a constricted breath. So this is how it goes. So tap along with me. So if you're already at a 10, you're not going to get to experience much of a shift, but I'm glad that you're there. But play along anyway. And you might be either contributing to the energy field here and helping other people, or at least getting some good practice on how to do tapping. So we're tapping on the side of the hand, we'll do our setup statement. So even though, then you say, even though I have a little constriction in my breath, I completely accept myself. And if that's hard to say, I'm willing to. Maybe someday accept myself. And then we do it again. Even though I have a little constriction in my breath, I accept myself. So now remember, no more accepting ourselves. We go to the top of the head, but I have a little constriction in my breath. And then that eyebrow corner, the constriction in my breath. And outside of your eye, the constriction in my breath. Under your eye, the constriction in my breath. Under your nose, the constriction in my breath. Under your mouth, this constriction. That collarbone point, my level, whatever your number is, 4, 7 out of 10 breath. And the last one, under your arm at the bra strap area, the constriction in my breath. Now, just for good measure, we'll add the finger points. So thumbnail bed, my constricted breathing. Index finger, my level, whatever your number is of breath. Middle finger, my constricted breath. We skip the ring finger and go to the pinky, my constricted breath. And then to the back of your hand. And we'll do our 9 gamut together. Ready? So close your eyes and open them. Look down to one side and back up. Look down to the other side and back up. Look straight up. Draw a big circle with your eyeballs. And then go the other way. And then hum a little tune. And then count to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then hum a little tune. And release. And now take a deep breath. And notice if there's any change in that level of breath. So a couple of you were willing to chat in what your numbers were, which is fabulous. If you would chat in now and let me know, do you feel like it was a more expansive, satisfying breath? Do you notice any change in your breathing? I would love to hear from you. And while you're typing and sharing, somebody had asked if you address only one thing at a time when you're tapping. And with practice, we in a real thorough EFT situation, specificity matters. So we get down to the nittiest, grittiest detail and go one piece of a problem at a time. But you can also just tap on globally, I'm feeling really upset, and you'll feel yourself calm down. So right now, people have shared up to a 10, breath was definitely better, went up 2 more points. We're moving in a positive direction. Somebody went from a 5 to a 10, which is awesome. Positive change from a 3 to a 7. Yeah, it's so cool, isn't it? So somebody's asked, is it okay to avoid tapping around the eyes? The points around your eyes are really important points. So you can touch or rub it a little bit. If you really want to avoid it, then you can avoid it, and you can even imagine that you're tapping there. And somebody actually did a study, and they wanted to see what happens to our brains while we're tapping, but you can't be in an MRI machine while you're tapping. So they had people imagine that they were tapping. And what we saw was the working memory lighting up because they were thinking about tapping, and the visual cortex. It's pretty funny. But they did also report that they were feeling better. So you can just imagine that you're tapping on those spots, or you can leave them out. And this thing, this back of the hand thing, it's like the redheaded stepchild of the EFT tapping world, and people forget to use it, and it is so helpful. So Anne Marie chatted in that moving her eyes around was difficult, and that's the second time that I've heard people having difficulty with the eye rolling. So yes, you'll enjoy that ginger tea, and you can try see if moving your eyes from one side to the other will help. But that eye roll thing is, I think it's one of the secret ingredients to this whole EFT. But if it's making you nauseous, obviously it's not worth doing. So I'm really glad that you guys had that experience. And somebody said you don't feel a difference, but you've got a cough because of an allergy. So yeah, that could have something to do with it. We'll have some other chances to practice. And Lori, who's been coming to the EFT tapping group, has just responded about the eye rolling, that it got easier with practice. And I've noticed in my clinical work that usually when there's a lot of emotional trauma, the eye rolls tend to not be very smooth. But I think that's a little different from the nausea. So we'll play along with that and see what happens, but try just the side to side movement and see if that's helpful. I want to share with you a different screen now, and I will remember not to be giving you a big demonstration while I've got my screen shared.
Well, and I want it, Sarah, while you're sharing your screen,
a good
if
moment
you go to speaker view while you're screen sharing, our attendees should still be able to see you as the speaker. So they would just see you. So it might be little, but they should still be able to see you.
Me, so a little tile of me. Thank you. And Erin, is it time for you to do something with your tea, or are we still good?
No, you're still good. Yeah, everything is good. I'll show you at the end, but I love this. I did have a question for you, Sarah, real quickly, if I may ask. So the whole routine that we just went through, if we wanted to do something like that at home, would we just do that whole cycle once? Is it something that we repeat like over and over again? How does that work?
That's a really good question. So it depends on how you feel. So if you're upset and you really need a tool to calm down, then you would do that until you feel calmer. Okay. But it usually doesn't take very long. And then once you've started to work through your issues and you're in more of just a good place, then you can use it to kind of keep the negativity at bay, keep the anxiety at bay, stay in a good place by just running through that one time quickly. You can even leave out the fingers and the 9 gamut, but just tap on the rest of the spots. And it's a really good self-care practice. So good question. Thank you for asking it. And Susan asked a question in the chat, tapping group. So we do have a tapping group that's worth a passport square. It's a 6-session series. And we're just finishing up the inaugural group this week. And shortly we will be announcing the next series. So within the next, sometime in May, we'll probably be starting the next series. And Erin, to answer your question, Cynthia was sharing, usually she's doing 3 rounds. So it's, it does kind of depend on what's going on too. Okay, let me share this screen. I want to tell you a little bit about the research on this. So I'm actually giving a talk at the Energy Psychology Conference in a couple of weeks. And this is a little bit of what I'm going to be sharing with them about how to use EFT when you're working with clients who have cancer. So there are more than 275 articles that have been published in peer-reviewed journals, which means that there's a certain amount of scientific rigor behind them. And of those articles, more than 125 are studies. And of those studies, more than 70 are randomized controlled studies, which is the gold standard for scientific research. And then there are another more than 55 that are outcome studies that takes the same group of people, does a test, gives EFT, does another test and see how they've improved, which is also relevant, right? There's enough data now that they've published 5 meta-analyses, which is there was enough studies that they could kind of combine all the data, and the brilliant statisticians of the world crunch the numbers and see how effective really is this technique. And 5 systemic reviews and 14 comparative reviews, so a decent body of literature. And in fact, among the 400 or more different kinds of psychotherapy, energy psychology is in the top tier in terms of research base. So a very well-researched therapeutic approach. And the research is gaining momentum. So back when I first stumbled upon this, there were only 18 studies, randomized controlled trials, but between 2012 and 2016, that number jumped by 27. Then recently, a colleague of mine he stumbled upon all these studies that were published overseas in non-English language journals. There's a treasure trove from Indonesia, for example, studies out of Turkey and Iran. So most of those studies haven't been translated into English, and they're also from, what else did I say here? Spanish language journals. Turns out my partner, my boyfriend's family has this farm in Texcoco, Mexico, and right near it is this university that's renowned around the world for their cutting edge research in CAM therapies. And they, one of the studies that I found came out of that university. I was like, oh, it's such a small world. So the research is strong enough that the protocols are also gaining some traction. So in the United Kingdom, their version of the NIH has created a special category for techniques like EFT that's called combined somatic, cognitive, and energy practices or therapies. And the United States, the Veterans Administration, has said that EFT, what we just did, is a generally safe therapy for post-traumatic stress. And in Asia, South Korea's medical system has approved the use of EFT. And energy psychology, which is EFT, is a type of energy psychology. It's working faster and getting better than results than other approaches. So this helps with a host of issues, including anxiety, depression, food cravings, traumas. In head-to-head studies, there have been 8 that compare cognitive behavior therapy, which is kind of gold standard of talk therapy, with energy psychology. And they're finding that EP either is equivalent or more effective than cognitive behavior therapy. And other studies are finding that the energy psychology approaches achieve results in much less time. There are studies about veterans with their PTSD finding that thing that we used to think people, once they had it, they would have it for life. 86% of veterans no longer had symptoms. That's twice as effective in half the time compared to the treatment as usual. And this is a little bit about those meta-analyses that I was talking about. So anxiety, it's definitely helpful for depression. It's definitely helpful for, and PTSD, it's definitely helpful for. There are other studies that looked at our physiology. So cortisol, and cortisol is huge in the cancer community. We need to have this diurnal cortisol fluctuation in order to get a good night's sleep. And usually when people have chronically elevated levels of cortisol, eventually your adrenals kind of are like, forget it, I give up. And then we don't have as much in the morning, and we don't have the same fluctuation, and that ends up affecting our sleep. And so consistently elevated cortisol leads to eventually depleted levels of cortisol. So these are in the earlier stages, looking for drops in cortisol after emotional freedom techniques. So, you know, a bunch of studies there finding that, yes, it takes that stress hormone out of your body. There was a functional MRI study, not the one about imagining tapping, but she had people who had weight problems and food, like addictive eating behaviors, and treated them with EFT and did brain scans, then treated with EFT over, I think, 2 months, and then did another set of brain scans and found that she was clever. She showed pictures in the machine of the palatable food that people had their addictive urges around, and their brains didn't light up after they had done EFT for a couple of you know, I think it was 8 sessions. So other studies look at immune function and found that there are changes in our immunology, changes in gene expression after people do their EFT tappings, and those are the authors. And some people are looking at energy psychology, EFT for health. So not a ton of research here, and this is where the international stuff gets exciting because that's where people were looking. So preoperative anxiety, they got significantly reduced anxiety before. This was a study with miscarriages here and found that people had less anxiety and PTSD after they were treated with EFT. That was out of Iran. This study was supporting people who had chronic disease, and it was a qualitative study, so it was more like narrative stories. And this lady wrote a book about using EFT to treat dental anxiety. So some decent research about health. Another one about women preoperatively, found a significant drop in pre-op anxiety. So helpful. And look at that p-value, is just amazing. That means that there's less than 1 out of 10,000, 1 in 10,000 chance that that was something other than the EFT. Another study looked at chronic pain. And here's another one about dental anxiety. For some reason, people are looking at dental anxiety. Another with cancer in particular, just a handful of studies, significant reduction in anxiety in this 2021 study. Another randomized control study found a reduction in cancer-related cognitive impairment, otherwise known as chemo brain. And then finally, older study out of Indonesia, a decrease in anxiety. So that's all I wanted to say about EFT and health and cancer and the research. So that's kind of a random walk down the research trails about energy psychology. I want to give us a chance to do a little bit more tapping, but I want to also pause and check in, look at the chat and see what's going on there, see if anybody has any questions.
Yeah. And you know what, Sarah, we had a few people that hopped on late or joined us a little while when we were into it. So if you just want to reiterate sort of the benefits of tapping, why we might do it, and that just to kind of lay the groundwork again for those that may have missed it in the very beginning, I think we might find that a little beneficial.
Yeah, so EFT is a form of energy psychology, and this is tapping on different body points while we talk about or talk in our heads about the problem that's upsetting us or our emotional distress. And we do this by tapping on first the side of the hand while we say the problem and also I accept myself. We do that twice. And then we tap on the rest of the points. Don't have to worry about accepting ourselves anymore. We tap on the top of the head, inside corner of the eyebrow, outside of the eye, under the nose, under the mouth, under the collarbones, and at the bra strap area. You can either reach around or go like a chicken wing. And we find that when we're distressed and upset, if we do this protocol, it helps to reduce our distress. So I was working with a young woman today who was sexually assaulted when she was in high school by her boyfriend and his friend. And she had kind of blacked out and woke up to find that they were doing this to her. And so now it was more than 10 years ago, and she's now finally ready to address it. And we started doing this a very clinical application of EFT. And when we started talking, and I said, rate your distress about that event in general on a 10 scale, with 10 is the worst. She was like, it's like an 8. And we did this very clinical approach where we just kind of globally tapped on, there was a thing that happened. And then I had her imagine the whole thing from when she was saved to the first time that she noticed something was wrong. We stop right there, do the tapping, move on, stop again, do the tapping. She got herself down to a 3 out of 10. Then we went through again, and she this time was telling me what happened, not anything that she didn't want to share, but just basically going through the story, the narrative of what happened. When she got to a moment of upset, stopped and did the tapping again. We'll probably work on that 1 or 2 more clinical sessions together, but she went from 8 out of 10 about a sexual assault when she was a teenager to yeah, I remember it, but I don't really have any feeling. She said, I was crying about it before or fighting back tears, and I don't feel that way anymore. It's just a memory. I know that it happened. This is, to me, the most exciting thing about EFT. When I was a grad student, my pet project was always trauma. Every time we had to write a paper, I was like, well, let's look at group therapy for trauma. Let's look at, any time that there was something, I was into the research about trauma. And back in those days, and that was the mid 2000s, like 04 to 07, there was a researcher at Penn, a lovely woman who did a lot of research about cognitive behavior therapy and trauma. And I was a little old grad student at Immaculata saying, this sucks. This is terrible. It's not these ladies' fault that they got raped, or this guy's fault that he was in a car crash, or whatever the traumatic thing. That's the best we have to offer. There's got to be something else. More power to you at Penn, but I got to find out what might work. So it pushed me to look for what else can we do? What else can we do? What else can we do? And I found some cool things. And for me, this is the most effective. It's very rigorous. We do the trauma protocol in a way that people don't cry. They don't have to get upset, and people feel better. I mean, you saw the research, 86% of veterans who had PTSD were no longer symptomatic. I mean, it's amazing. And then I'm doing this with my girl, not the first little girl who was assaulted that I've done this protocol with, and I'm so passionate about it. I don't want her to be the one walking around with PTSD. It's not her fault that happened. So I'll get off my soapbox. But the thing is that for many, so having a cancer diagnosis is emotionally traumatic. And so just having the diagnosis is a trauma. Then you're going through the treatment, you're dealing with all the emotional upsets, puts you at a heightened level because of the trauma of the diagnosis. And then all those other emotions are going to come up. So even if you don't have a thing like being raped when you were in high school, you've got this trauma. And you can use EFT to clear the trauma, but you can also use it, like we just did, to take the edge off of some of those uncomfortable feelings. It's just a great tool to have in your toolkit. But I'm also wanting to be really clear. There's a difference between I feel really sad and I accept myself. I'm so sad about my diagnosis and I feel really sad, which is so important, and do it. But it's also different to work with a clinician when you have a specific traumatic event. That's something like what this girl was talking about, and that many of us have in our backgrounds. I've had in my work with Unite for Her, a woman who was diagnosed with breast cancer, and she went to her consult with the surgeon, and she thought that the surgeon said you have stage 4 cancer, but that's not what the surgeon said. It was a grade 4 tumor. But she couldn't get it out of her head, even though she understood that she had misheard this. She was carrying around all of that emotional charge of thinking that she had been diagnosed with stage 4. Which for those of you who are, you know that that's traumatic. And for those of you who aren't, you can imagine how traumatic that would be. And so she would get so heightened, even though it wasn't actually what was happening to her. In one session of EFT, she cleared that. And I talked to her a couple of weeks later, and she was like, oh yeah, I kind of forgot that that was it's that powerful. So let's see, what else is happening in the chat?
I love how people are saying how they're using it during those specific points, like 2 days before chemo, 2 days after chemo, in the middle of the night, anxiety when you wake up and you can't sleep and your adrenaline is going a million miles a minute. You know, I love the examples that people are sharing on when they've been able to implement this in their life and when it's the best time for them. I love those examples.
Absolutely, absolutely. Middle of the night, anxiety. What is it about 3 o'clock in the morning? It's like none of my self-soothing tools are working. None of my capacity to talk myself off the ledge is working at 3 a.m. And I don't think I'm the only one. So tapping, just sit up, do a couple rounds of tapping, and you'll find yourself getting better. Somebody's asked about studies with chronic PTSD, and I think that by that you're talking about the childhood traumas, and we're getting there. I don't know about any studies yet, but from where I'm coming from, we know that people who have childhood adversity, the adverse childhood experiences, and so there's a study out of California, Kaiser Permanente Health Center, found out, these doctors kind of found out by accident that people who had childhood adversity, first thing they noticed was that they tended to be obese as adults, and almost all their obese patients had some kind of adversity during childhood, and that led them to what we call the ACE study. And it turns out that when people have a significant number, I think the critical number is 4 kinds of adversity during childhood, and that could be being beaten, being molested, witnessing violence in the home, living in poverty, having a parent die, having your parents get divorced, things like that. That leads to, as we could imagine, more difficulty in adulthood, including increased risk of health problems, including somebody did a study and found that people with lung cancer had a higher than societal average incidence of childhood adversity. So there's a link, at least with lung cancer and childhood adversity. For me, that's where the beauty of this kind of therapy comes from, that if we can treat those traumas that happened during childhood that lead to that complex PTSD, sequelae of events, more and more traumas happening because we end up being in the same trauma patterns. And then it eventually affects our, addictive behaviors and poverty and relationship problems, and even in some cases, things like cancer. Boy, if we can start treating this stuff before it gets to the disease state. I have colleagues who are really passionately working in schools and doing these interventions with children. There's a study underway now in Mexico City in the public schools, teaching this to school children. Another grad student in Australia did her dissertation on EFT in schools for some rural and more poverty-prone school district in Australia. I think it was in New South Wales, but I don't know enough to know. What else am I seeing? Somebody's saying you're going to learn more about it and try it before your scans this month because, oh my gosh, scanxiety, right? Like every time that stuff is coming up, everybody's got that heightened anxiety. And if this tool can help you get through that, give you something to do when the anxiety is there, give you a daily practice to keep the anxiety from getting there, oh my gosh, that could be such a game changer for people. Somebody's asked how this might be affecting our immune system for people with low white counts because of treatments. And we have seen changes in immune system. There were studies that showed the changes in immune system functioning. So I don't know if we've got specific white count area studies, but it's possible. They were looking at salivary immunoglobulin. And Erin, do you know that is a building block of white blood cells?
Salivary.
Immunoglobulin, SIG-A.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So there you go. So Dawson Church did a study, salivary immunoglobulin, and that definitely is, I knew it was affecting the immune system. So wouldn't that be amazing? Wouldn't that be so amazing?
I mean, I just think of like all the relationship between stress and how it impacts our body systemically. So it would almost make sense that you would see some sort of shift or some sort of effect when you're using these techniques and you're feeling less stressed. That number is coming down from a 10. That, of course, long term, we would think there would be some sort of effect. That's pretty interesting.
And you're so right. And the stress inflammation disease cycle is really pretty well documented, and we are understanding more what's happening at the molecular level. And I don't want to, it's like a dicey territory, because obviously when you're going through treatment for cancer, it's stressful and you will have stress. And I don't want to create more fear of like, oh my gosh, if I let myself get stressed, it's going to be bad for my health. So take it in the way that it's normal to have stress. We all have stress. And when you've been diagnosed with cancer and are going through treatment, yeah, you've got stress, and that's normal and human. And that's not going to be the game changer for you. But this could be. If you have tools to keep the stress at bay, what could happen to your immune system? So when you're in chronic stress and that chronic fight, flight, freeze, there's this link between your hypothalamus and your limbic system, the pituitary, that master gland that signals to the body what hormones to release, and your adrenals that are sitting on top of your kidneys. That's where your cortisol comes from, and adrenaline. And that you're constantly under fight, flight, freeze kind of gets fried. And like I was mentioning before, your body just kind of gives up on the production of cortisol over the long term. And so you don't get those nice diurnal variations that help you sleep more soundly. Not only that happens, but that starts to create inflammation, systemic inflammation. And when your cells are inflamed, they're like, seriously, they're puffed up. And they're signaling to your body, give me some more cytokines that are going to keep me puffed up, because I'm fighting off an invasion and I need to be puffed up so I can fight off an invasion. And so their cells are staying puffed up. They keep signaling, give me more of the stuff that's going to keep me puffed up so that I can handle any invasion that's coming. And we need more of an immune system response. And the thing is that we have cytokines, the little chemical messengers that tell the cells to stay puffed up and ready. And we have the ones that are like, okay, stress averted, you can go back to normal now. Well, when we're under chronic stress, the ones that say, okay, relax, go back to normal now, they never come around. So we've got all of this inflammation and none of the good anti-inflammatory. We need both. We have crisis and relax, crisis and relax. It's happening all the time, except for when things go haywire, then it's just crisis, crisis, crisis. And another thing that doesn't get turned on when you're in that chronic stress is the tumor necrotic factor. That little cytokine that says, okay, go find that cancer cell and kill it, doesn't get called upon. And so, we want to create the conditions of anti-inflammatory relaxation. So that's why the dietary changes that Unite are so passionate about, it's an anti-inflammatory way of approaching food. And that's why we're also so passionate about things like acupuncture and Reiki and yoga and breathing. So all that stuff will get us out of that chronic stress inflammation. And that's why we're also so passionate about these body-based tools like EFT and mindfulness meditation and all of those things that'll just retrain our bodies to be out of that chronic fight, flight, freeze response that gives our bodies a chance to be anti-inflamed, relax, change the cytokines, change the chemical messengers. And there's one other thing about that chronic inflammation. So we know that only a tiny portion of people who have breast cancer have that BRCA gene. So they're like, what else is happening? And when our cells are inflamed and all of that biochemistry is just a little bit different under the chronic inflammation, then the RNA. That's the protein that goes into your cell's nucleus, and it matches up to the DNA and replicates what's in the DNA. Then it trots on out into the cell body. It goes over to the ribosomes, and the ribosomes crank it out into these proteins, protein. Well, they make more transcription errors when your cells are inflamed. So the coding gets messed up because of that inflamed state. So that's my Sarah's course on psychoneuroimmunology and the stress inflammation disease cycle. And so when you have stress, don't be mad at yourself or afraid of having it. Be empowered and mindful, and know that we all have moods and they come and go, and you'll just keep using your tools and applying the lessons and trying the things. So do you guys want to talk more about psychoneuroimmunology than I thought I would? I'm glad that you enjoyed it. Do you want to do some tapping together? So
I would love to, yeah.
Tapping. Okay, so think about right now, think about your level of stress or sadness or overwhelm or anger. Those tend to be the big ones, or whatever else is heaviest on your shoulders right now. And rate that emotion on a 0 to 10 scale, with 10 is bad. It's as bad as it could be. And 0 is, I've got none of it. And then pay attention to the feelings in your body, and just notice when you key into that stress or sadness or overwhelm or anger or guilt, whatever it is, just notice where that feels, where you feel that in your body. I said guilt and my stomach went, so. All right, so I'm going to use the word guilt because obviously I had a little reaction to that, but you fill in your word. Okay, so we'll start by tapping. So Sandy's right there with me. Feel it in my stomach. Even though I feel this guilt, you say whatever's the one that you're working on. And I feel it in my stomach, but you say wherever you feel it. And it's at a level 7, whatever your number is. I accept myself and all my feelings. And even though right now I have this little feeling of guilt and I feel it in my body, I accept myself. And we're going to go to the top of your head. But I'm feeling a little guilt right now. And then your eyebrow corner. This guilt, and I feel it in my stomach. And outside of your eyes, and my guilt that's like at a level 7. And under your eyes, and that guilt, I feel it in my stomach. And under your nose, the guilt. And under your mouth, and I feel it in my stomach. And collarbones, the guilt. And under your arm, that guilt that I feel. We'll do the finger points to be thorough, but when you're doing it by yourself, you don't have to. And a lot of videos out there won't show it. This guilt that I have. And the index finger. I feel it in my stomach. And the middle finger, it's like a level 7, or at least it was. And the pinky finger, this guilt that I feel. And then the back of your hand. We'll do our 9 gamut or so. We skip the ring finger because that's the same meridian that we're now tapping on the back of the hand. And close your eyes and open them. Look down to one side, look down to the other side. If it doesn't make you dizzy or nauseous, look straight up and draw a big circle with your eyeballs. If it's complicated, try just looking side to side, and then go the other way. Relax your gaze and hum a little tune. And then pop quiz. 2 + 2 is, and then hum a little tune. And then relax. And tune into that emotion again. And notice how you're feeling. Is it the place in your body where you felt it before? Do you still feel it? You were rating it on a 10 scale. Did it shift? And use the chat and let us know how that's going, if you don't mind. So I don't feel in my guilt. I don't feel it in my stomach now. I think it was a little bit of like, did I talk too long, or am I doing a good job with the presentation? Like, oh, did I overdo it? I feel okay now. Hopefully you guys agree. So somebody went down by 2 or 3. Somebody's feeling stronger, feeling lighter, having a decrease in that intensity, feeling relaxed, went from a 7 to a 3. That's awesome. Good, 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 good. Cynthia didn't know about the finger points. Christine's feeling good about yourself. I'm so glad. So glad. You know, we all have, oh good, 7 to a 4. We all human beings feel all the feelings. And we tend to be so hard on ourselves when we're not feeling good about things. If I'm anxious, I'm going to not only be anxious, but mad at myself for being anxious, right? So I think it's really important for us to embrace that. We all feel all the feelings. It's part of being human. Those feelings will come and go, and they'll go faster if we don't beat ourselves up for having them. And then we can do tools like this EFT tapping to take the edge off. And yeah, let's do it. Let's empower ourselves. Let's heal the world. Begin by healing ourselves, one upset feeling at a time.